Hi, my name is Zach Stoller. I am an elementary art teacher from Dublin, Ohio. I am also the author of the Thomas Elementary Art blog. And I am really excited to present to you today about a really killer printmaking curriculum that is scaffolded for grades 1 through 5. What I'm going to do today is show you some examples of projects that I use here in my classroom. I have one for each grade level, 1st through 5th. What you see up here are some teacher examples of the projects, and I'll also share some student examples with you. So with scaffolding, the idea is that you're building knowledge from one grade level to the next. And I've worked really hard to build my printmaking curriculum so it actually works really well that way. It's taken several years to build up projects and find ones that work really well for me. We'll start with 1st grade here. This is a 1st grade example. This is a printmaking project inspired by a Wayne Thiebaud painting of several gumball machines. Now the printmaking here is actually the gumballs. And with 1st grade, what we want to try to do is introduce the project. We want to introduce new media in a way that's going to be simple and students can have success with. So the simplest form of printmaking is really just kind of stamping. So in order to actually create the gumballs here, I kind of MacGyvered my own tool with a simple plastic cap. I cut out some round pieces of foam to glue onto the cap. And then students were actually able to use just tempera paint to paint onto the foam and then print with those. They could print a couple times, add more paint, print more, wipe it off with a wet paper towel, and then apply a new color to do different colors of gumball machines as they went. It was a really good introduction to printmaking for my 1st graders, and they were very successful with it. Student example I have here is this. We see that the student has really nice vivid colors, a lot of prints up here in the gumball area, and it turned out spectacular. So now we move on to 2nd grade. Students have the concepts now of what printmaking is, and we want to build up some new skills with different materials and kind of a different concept as well. So this is a project that was actually created by a friend of mine and colleague here in Dublin named Drew Jones. And Drew came up with a project that is about where the wild things are. It's kind of based on that book. Students for this project actually use a couple new materials. They use the printmaking foam, which many of you I'm sure have seen before, and they come up with their own wild things. They sketch out several and then draw their favorite onto a piece of foam just with some Sharpie. Once that image is drawn on there, they press down with a blunt tool. I have some little wooden sticks that are kind of rounded on the ends that work really well, but you can use a lot of other things for this product. Once they have this ready to go, they're introduced to printmaking ink and printing with a brayer. So the ink I use here in my elementary classroom is this Blick block printing ink. I actually use this for grades 2 through 5. It's really nice. The colors are in a really wide variety. It's water-based, so it cleans up really easily. So we take a little bit of the printmaking ink, squeeze some onto a piece of plexiglass, and then we use the brayer to spread out the ink. Once the ink has been spread out and onto the brayer, students can ink their foam and then press that onto their own paper to create their image. What I really like about this is that the students are creating their own image. They're not just stamping a shape like they were in 1st grade, so they're a lot more invested in the product. I always have my students print at least one more copy than what they're going to need. In this case, they use 4 of them for their final project and cut them out and then mount them on some black paper. Use some construction paper crayon for some text at the bottom that they can get really creative with. I really like how this project turns out for my students because, again, it's really successful, and that's something I try to build into my projects. A student example I have here was done last school year, actually. And you can see the print quality on here is every bit as good as my example. Really happy with the results of this particular project. I've been using it for several years. Now the 3rd grade project. And with my 3rd grade project, I didn't have one last year. This is the first year I actually had written a 3rd grade project. And I wanted to try to fill in some sort of gap in my curriculum that I hadn't been covering yet with printmaking. So I wanted to do something with collagraphs. So instead of pressing into the surface like I did with the foam for 2nd grade, the collagraph you actually raise up the surface and print with that. So I did some searching online and found a blog from a middle school teacher that had done collagraphs and quotes. I thought that would be fantastic for my third graders and kind of rewrote the lesson and adapted it for my own needs. Big part of my third grade curriculum is having artwork that reflects the actual personality of the students. They can put a lot of themselves into. So each student picked their own quote. They actually designed the lettering themselves and then actually drew it out onto a piece of foam. So this is different than the foam I use for second grade. That's kind of specifically made for printmaking. This is just a foam that can be used for all kinds of different things. I've seen it adhesive back. There's a lot of different things it can be used for. I just wanted to use it to build up the surface. So the quotes are actually written out on here. All the letters are cut out. It takes a little while. And then they're arranged on a piece of chipboard. So you can see kind of a final example here of how the letters are arranged. In order to get this done, it's kind of a challenge because you can kind of see here, everything has to be backwards because it's going to be making a print in reverse of this. So the challenge here is to have the students arrange their letters so it's going to come out correctly. And an easy way to kind of get around that is to use mirrors. So I have my students arrange their letters, check it with a mirror, have a friend check it, and then I triple check it at the end. Because it's kind of easy to have letters flopped. Once this is done, I had them go over it with just a real thin layer of acrylic medium to kind of seal everything in. And then we use the same inking techniques we use in second grade. So we're building up that base of knowledge with kind of a new way of printing for third grade. The end result are nice quotes we printed on construction paper. And I was super, super happy with the students' results this year. This was a project I didn't know if it was going to be too hard for them, for third graders. And I was really impressed by the work that they did. Here's a student example. I really like how these projects actually show the personality of the student. This one that says, "Actions speak louder than words," was done by one of my quietest students. And it's very, very true for him. He's a good kid. He does what he's supposed to do. And his actions do definitely speak a lot louder than his words. Moving on to fourth grade, we're going back to our friend, the white foam. Instead of a really simple application for this like they did in second grade, my students really pushed the limits of the foam for fourth grade. What we try to do here are some animal printmaking projects that are based on kind of loosely off of a Warhol series of cow portraits. So they pick an animal portrait, and the first thing they try to do is just draw the animal portrait. I'm really big into using photo reference, so I get a ton of books from the library. Each student selects an animal. They draw just the head with as many details as they can to make it look realistic. Once that's done, they trace over the head. You can see I've done it with red colored pencil here, directly on top of their foam with just the outline of the animal. So you just have the silhouette. This is then printed with those same inks onto some white paper. So you can see the first color I printed on here is the orange. The next day, they put their sketch back over top of the foam and press in the rest of the details. So these details are drawn over directly onto the paper, and then you remove the paper from the foam and you can press in a little bit harder. With all the details, it'll look like this. And then the next step is to actually cut the animal out. So we're doing a reduction printmaking where we're kind of systematically taking a little bit off of the surface in order to have the different colors of print show up. This is actually a 3-color print. So students will use a different color with their second print and then print directly on top of what they printed the previous week. So you can see, for my example, the second color I used was this dark blue. And I really like how the details of the animal show up in that original color. So all my details are orange, and it provides a real nice pop. Finally, in order to get the third color, I really try to have my students take a piece of the animal that would make sense for it to be a different color. Maybe it's a different texture, maybe it's a different color on the actual animal. In this case with the rhino, it made sense to do the horns. So the horns would then be cut off, these would be inked and printed right up there to provide the third color. This is probably one of my top 2 or 3 favorite projects that I teach for any grade level. I have so many amazing results with my students. Here are a couple that were just finished last week. We see we have an eagle over here. The eagle is amazing with the amount of detail in the feathers. There's a bear here that was done by a student that had just moved into the country. And even without much English speaking at all, I mean, he busted out one of the most amazing prints out of the whole grade level. So you can see there's a lot of student success here. So with this project, we didn't really introduce anything new as far as materials or anything like that, but we're just pushing the limits of what the printmaking material can do. Moving on to 5th grade, since students have mastered printing with a foam, we want to use a whole different material. And the material we use here is called soft cut, sometimes it's called easy cut, and it is kind of like a newer version of linoleum that you might have used in middle school, high school, college. The big difference here, like the name would suggest, is that it's really, really easy to cut. So you don't need things like a bench hook. You're still using the same gouge to carve with, but it's made a lot safer because of the fact that this is so easy to cut. The idea for this particular project is we're trying to make a radial design with our print. So this year I based it loosely on Celtic knot designs, and since we are in Dublin, Ohio, kind of made sense. And with any radial project, you'd want to create a center of your print. This is going to be printed 4 times, kind of around that center point. And the big key to making this successful is that you're actually kind of measuring out at different points on the 2 sides that are closest to the center, and making sure that your design begins and ends at one of those lines. That way all the lines connect when you do your final print. This, when printed 4 times, ends up looking like this. So you can see that that one print repeated makes this really nice cohesive design that works really, really well. So you can see that I have built this printmaking curriculum and scaffolded it in such a way that students are kind of slowly introduced to new ideas and new materials and new techniques. And by the time they leave 5th grade, they are more than ready for whatever middle school can throw at them. If you would like to see any more examples, especially student examples of these projects, please go to my blog. It is at thomaselementaryart.blogspot.com. You'll also have access to all the lesson plans for these projects. I think you'll enjoy using them in your classroom. Thank you very much for watching.